Most of us spend our entire lives working for money, but we never stop to ask why the money never seems to show up to work for us. We've been told that if we just grind harder and sacrifice more, we'll eventually reach a point of freedom. But for most, that point is a horizon that keeps moving further away. The truth is, if you don't learn how to make money obey you, you will remain its servant forever, no matter how high your salary goes. The reason you feel stuck isn't a lack of effort. It's a silent, mental agreement you've made with your own limitations. You're running on an invisible survival software that keeps you playing safe, while the real keys to leverage are sitting right in front of you, disguised as things you've been taught to ignore. If you carry this misunderstanding into your future, you'll find that a bigger paycheck only builds a more expensive cage. Real clarity doesn't come from a single tip or a quick hack. It requires a total shift in how you see your value and your authority. Most people will drop off before they reach the part that actually changes the math of their life. So, let's begin. I used to think that the walls around us were made of brick and mortgage, or the lack of it. That some people were just born with a map, and the rest of us were left wandering around in the dark, hoping to trip over a bag of money. It's a comforting thought, isn't it, to believe that where we end up is mostly out of our hands. It lets us off the hook. It gives us permission to be tired. But there's this uncomfortable, quiet realization that eventually catches up to you. It usually happens at 3 a.m. or while you're staring at a grocery receipt you can't quite justify. It's the realization that no one ever wanders into a better life by mistake. No one escapes poverty by accident. We treat wealth like it's a weather pattern, something that happens to us if the conditions are right. We wait for the promotion, the lucky break, the right political climate. But wealth isn't a destination you arrive at. It's a decision you make before you even take the first step. It's a mental contract you sign with yourself, usually when things are at their absolute worst. The truth is, most of us have made a secret agreement with our current circumstances. We've looked at the struggle, the debt, the just getting by, and we've whispered, yeah, okay, this is probably who I am. That's the moment poverty becomes real. Not when the bank account hits zero, but when the mind stops arguing with the lack. It's an internal yes to a life we actually hate. I remember sitting in a car that wouldn't start, feeling that familiar heavy heat of shame in my chest. I was waiting for someone, anyone, to notice I was drowning and throw me a rope. I wanted the world to be fair. I wanted opportunity to be a door that someone else opened for me. But as I sat there, the silence in that broken-down car told me something I didn't want to hear. Ownership isn't just about owning a business or a home. It's about owning the fact that your current reality is a reflection of what you've decided to tolerate. It sounds harsh. It feels like a weight. But there is a strange, raw kind of beauty in that weight. Because if you are the reason things are the way they are, then you are also the only one who can change them. You don't need a permission slip from the world to decide you're done being small. There's a common saying that goes, "As a man thinks in his heart, so is he." It's not just a poetic line. It means that your life is essentially a printout of your deepest convictions. If you think of yourself as a victim of the way things are, your brain will spend all its energy finding evidence to prove you're right. It will ignore the open doors and focus only on the locks. You become the architect of your own cage, meticulously tightening the bolts every time you say, "I can't," or "that's just for other people." The decision to be wealthy, to truly thrive, doesn't look like a cinematic montage. It looks like a quiet, private stubbornness. It's the moment you stop looking at your life as a series of things happening to you and start seeing it as a series of things you are causing. It's a shift from "I hope things get better" to "I will make things better." And once that shift happens, once you stop agreeing with the struggle, the world around you starts to look different. Not because the world changed overnight, but because you stopped looking for ways to fit into it and started looking for ways to lead it. But that's where the real friction begins. Because once you've made the decision, you start to notice something. You start to see that even when people have the same hours in a day and the same drive to succeed, they don't move at the same speed. It makes you wonder why some people seem to be running on clear pavement, while the rest of us are wading through waist-deep water, and why the gap between where you are and where you want to be often feels like a canyon, when in reality, it's just a hairline fracture in the way we see the world. It's frustrating, isn't it? Watching two people start at the same line, with the same background, maybe even the same degree hanging on the wall. And 5 years later, one is building an empire while the other is still complaining about the cost of coffee. We love to tell ourselves it's a matter of hustle or grind because those are things we can measure. We can count the hours. We can see the sweat. But the difference is smaller than you think. It's not that the people who rise are working 10 times harder. There aren't enough hours in the day to work 10 times harder than a person already doing 40 or 50. The secret isn't in the effort, it's in the patterns. It's the invisible software running in the background while they're making coffee, or sitting in traffic, or deciding what to do with that extra $50 at the end of the week. Most of us are walking around with survival software. We're programmed to look for safety, to avoid losing, to just get through the month. But the people who move forward are running a different script. They aren't looking for safety. They're looking for leverage. They aren't asking, "Can I afford this?" They're asking, "What is this worth?" It's a subtle shift in the internal dialogue, but over 1,000 tiny daily choices, it creates a massive separation. Think about the way we spend our mental energy. Most of us are world-class experts in what's wrong. We can tell you exactly why the economy is a mess, why our boss is a nightmare, and why the system is rigged. And look, we might be right. But being right about why you're stuck doesn't actually get you unstuck. It just makes your cage feel more justified. The people who rise have a sort of healthy ignorance toward the obstacles. They aren't blind to them. They just refuse to give them the seat at the head of the table. They spend their energy on the how rather than the why not. I've noticed that we often stall because we're waiting for a sign that it's safe to move. We want the green light all the way down the street before we put the car in gear. We look at the haves and assume they had some special information or a guarantee we didn't get. But the only difference is that they were willing to move while the light was still yellow. There's a quiet irony in it. We spend so much time comparing our middle to someone else's end. We see the house, the influence, the calm, and we assume it's a result of some grand, complex strategy. But wealth is rarely built on grand gestures. It's built on the boring stuff. It's built on the decision to read a book instead of scrolling through the curated lives of strangers. It's the decision to invest in a skill when you'd rather spend that money on a temporary shot of dopamine from a new pair of shoes. Success is just a series of very unsexy habits that have been allowed to compound. When you start to examine your own patterns, it's a little embarrassing. You realize how much of your day is spent reacting to things rather than initiating them. You realize that the stall isn't a wall, it's a loop. We keep making the same choices, expecting a different exit ramp to magically appear. We tell ourselves we're waiting for the right moment, but the moment is usually just waiting for us to stop being so damn careful. We're so afraid of making a mistake that we make the biggest mistake of all, staying exactly where we are. And yet, even when you see the patterns, even when you decide to change the software, there's this lingering shadow, a voice that whispers that you're just pretending. It's that hollow feeling you get when you start acting like the person you want to be. But the mirror and the bank account haven't caught up to the vision yet, and you feel like a kid wearing their parents' oversized suit, hoping no one notices that you're mostly just fabric and air. It's the most vulnerable part of the journey, that gap between the decision and the result. We live in a world that is obsessed with the reveal. We want the before and after photos. We want the climax of the movie where the music swells and the hero finally gets the trophy. But no one tells you about the long, quiet Tuesday afternoons in the middle, where you're working on a dream that currently has a following of exactly one person: you. We've been conditioned to believe that confidence is something you earn once you've succeeded. We think, once I have the money, I'll feel like a person who belongs in the room. Or, once I get the title, I'll stop feeling like a fraud. But that's a trap. It's a trick the mind plays to keep us playing small. The truth is, belief must come before proof. If you wait for the world to clap for you before you believe in yourself, you're going to be waiting in a very quiet room for a very long time. The world doesn't applaud potential. It barely even notices it. The world only applauds results. But you cannot get the results without the audacity to believe in something that doesn't exist yet. It's a strange, almost delusional kind of faith. It's looking at a patch of dirt and seeing a skyscraper. It's looking at your empty pockets and seeing an estate. I remember trying to fake it till I made it, but that always felt like lying. There's a better way to look at it. It's not about pretending you have something you don't. It's about acknowledging a truth that hasn't materialized in the physical world yet. It's knowing that you are the type of person who finds a way, even when the way is currently under construction. There's an old saying, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Basically, it's the idea that your conviction itself is a form of currency. It is the down payment on your future. If you don't have that internal certainty, you'll fold the second someone gives you a weird look or a no at a meeting. And let's be honest, people will give you those looks. There is nothing more uncomfortable for a group of people standing still than to watch one person start to run. Your self-belief is a mirror that shows them their own stagnation, and they'll usually try to helpfully remind you of the risks. They'll call it being realistic. But being realistic is just a fancy way of saying being average. It's an agreement to stay within the boundaries that other people have drawn for you. When you stop seeking external validation, something shifts. You stop performing and start producing. You realize that your value isn't a fluctuating stock price based on how many likes you got, or how much your family approves of your little project. Your value is fixed. It was there before you started, and it'll be there when you finish. This kind of internal certainty is the only thing that survives the valley of disappointment, that stretch of time where you're doing the work, making the sacrifices, and seeing absolutely zero return on investment. That's where most people quit. They think the lack of results means they were wrong about themselves. But what if the lack of results is just the world's way of asking, how much do you actually believe this? Because once you stop needing the applause, you start to hear something else. You start to hear a different kind of frequency. You begin to realize that you aren't just a worker bee in someone else's hive. You have a specific, unique something that the market is actually starving for. You start to wonder not just how to work, but what you were actually built to do. And you begin to ask the one question that changes the entire math of your life. What are you naturally paid to be? It's a strange way to put it, I know. We're taught from a very young age that work is supposed to be a struggle, that if you aren't exhausted, you isn't doing it right. We treat hard work like a badge of honor, but hard work without alignment is just a slow way to burn out. There's a massive difference between the effort of a man rowing against the current and the effort of a man who has finally learned how to set a sail. The world is full of people working themselves to the bone in roles that don't fit them, trying to be a better version of someone else. But wealth doesn't reward imitation. It rewards uniqueness. It rewards that specific intersection of what you do effortlessly and what the world desperately needs. Most of us treat our natural gifts like they're cheating. If it comes easy to us, whether it's solving a technical problem, organizing chaos, or just knowing how to talk to people, we assume it's not valuable. We think value only comes from the things that make our heads hurt. But what if your greatest economic leverage is actually the thing you do when you think you're just being yourself? There's an old idea that says, a man's gift makes room for him. It's not saying a man's grind makes room for him, or his degree makes room for him. It's his gift. That innate, raw talent that you've probably been ignoring because it felt too simple. When you align your daily actions with that gift, the friction in your life starts to evaporate. You stop pushing the boulder and start letting it roll. I spent years trying to be well-rounded. I tried to fix all my weaknesses, thinking that would make me more marketable. It just made me mediocre at everything. The truth is, the most successful people are actually quite jagged. They have massive, glaring weaknesses, but they are so world-class in one specific area that those weaknesses don't even matter. They've discovered their economic value. They aren't selling their time. They're selling their perspective, their taste, or their ability to solve a specific kind of pain. Think about the things people ask you for help with, not the things you want to be asked for, but the things people actually seek you out for. That's a clue. That's the market whispering to you about where your value lies. If you can stop trying to be the best at a job anyone can do and start being the only at the thing you were built for, the money starts to follow a different set of rules. Wealth accelerates when you move from being a commodity to being a category. A commodity is replaceable. A commodity competes on price and hours worked. But a category is essential. When you trust your unique value, you stop asking for permission to be paid. You start positioning yourself where your natural output creates the most impact. It's a terrifying shift because it requires you to own your weirdness. It requires you to stop hiding behind a resume and start standing behind your results. But once you find that rhythm, once you're finally being paid for the value you create, rather than the time you occupy, you realize that earning the money was only the first half of the puzzle. Now comes the part that most people never quite master. The part where you stop working for the money and the money starts showing up to work for you, ready to take orders. Like a soldier waiting for a command rather than a master, you're constantly trying to appease. It's a funny thing how we talk about making money. We use the word make as if once the dollars land in the account, the job is done. But earning it is actually the easy part. The real work, the part that separates a life of freedom from a life of high-priced exhaustion, is learning how to make that money obey you. Most of us have a very polite, almost subservient relationship with our finances. We work for it, we worry about it, and when it arrives, we immediately give it away to someone else to pay for the life we're too tired to enjoy. We treat money like a guest that's just passing through, rather than a tool that's supposed to stay and build something. Wealth isn't a number in a bank account. It's a system of discipline. It's the quiet, often boring practice of ownership. It's realizing that every dollar you save and strategically deploy is a worker you've hired to go out and bring back more friends. When you start to see money as a tool, you stop being afraid of it. You stop treating it like a fragile thing that might disappear if you look at it wrong. You start to exercise authority. You realize that intelligent risk isn't a gamble. It's just a way of putting your tools to work in the right soil. True independence doesn't come from a big paycheck. It comes from the gap you create between what you earn and what you need, and what you do with that space in the middle. It all circles back, doesn't it? To that first 3 a.m. realization that no one escapes the struggle by accident. It starts with that raw, private decision to stop agreeing with a life that feels too small. It moves through those long, lonely stretches where you have to be your own audience, believing in your value when there isn't a single person in the room clapping for you. And then it's about finally trusting that weird gift of yours, the one you tried to hide, and realizing it was actually your greatest leverage all along. When you put it all together, you realize that the success we're all chasing isn't really about the cars or the houses. It's about the quiet at night. It's about the absence of that heavy, frantic heat in your chest. It's the ability to look at your life and know that you aren't a passenger anymore. You're the one with your hands on the wheel, navigating by a map you drew yourself. The landscape looks different from here, doesn't it? The walls that felt so high at the beginning, they turn out to have been mostly made of shadows. I wonder, as you're listening to this, where are you in that process? Maybe you're still in that broken down car, waiting for the shift to happen. Or maybe you've made the decision, but you're still waiting for the world to notice. I'd love to hear about that moment for you, the moment things clicked, or the moment you realized you were done playing small. If you feel like sharing, leave a comment. It helps to know we're not the only ones walking this path. And if this conversation felt like something you needed today, it would mean a lot if you stayed a while. Maybe like the video or subscribe to the channel just so we can keep these reflections going. It's a quiet way to help us grow this space together. Until next time, take a breath. You're doing better than you think. Go easy on yourself. We'll talk soon.